A kind introduction. Yes, I am an NMR physicist and also a qualified Ayurvedic medical doctor. And at the outset, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share with you all some of my very preliminary research data in this exciting area of Ayurveda and using modern techniques to study some of the concepts. We are all aware that, I don't think there's any civilization or country which has not used plants for medicinal purpose. And India has a very long history of use of medicinal plants. What makes the use of medicinal plants in Ayurveda very interesting is that there is a theory behind it. It's not a simple experimental, trial and error understanding of the plants. There is a theory behind that. And the theory behind the use of medicinal plants in Ayurveda is also the theory behind Ayurveda. To put my work in context, I would like to give you a very brief introduction, as brief as possible, on Ayurveda, focusing on the specific theory of Ayurveda that medicinal plants are understood on. We all know how complicated system the human system is. It's a very complicated, complex biological system, which also means that there can be different perspectives. So structural and biochemical perspective are the perspectives of modern chemistry and modern biology and medicine, and Ayurveda has a functional perspective. And if you look at the structural perspective of modern medicine, it has a hierarchical model with atom as the fundamental unit, building block, and then you have molecules, organelles, cells, tissues, and so on. The entire organism is understood in terms of the various systems like endocrine system or digestive system and so on. Now the biochemical perspective also has the same, it follows the same model, except that at each level of the structural hierarchy, biochemistry is studied. Now if you think about a functional perspective, I think intuitively you will know that there are many contributing factors to a function, structures and biochemistry included. So a functional perspective is going to be a very different perspective. It is going to be an inclusive perspective which includes in itself all the parameters that contributes to a function, starting from structures to biochemistry to all activities here, and many other parameters I have not mentioned here. So as I said, Ayurveda has a functional perspective. And when you have a system as complicated as the human system, there has to be some kind of classification and categorization to be able to handle the system. So Ayurveda has identified three major functions: movement, metabolism, and growth. Of course, they don't call it by these names. They call it by the name Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. These are words in Sanskrit, the language of Ayurveda. And in the context of Ayurveda, Vata refers to movement, and Pitta refers to the function of metabolism, and Kapha refers to growth. What is interesting is that they not only cover functions, but they also include a set of physical, chemical, and physiological parameters which impact the function. Without going into the nitty-gritty details of this, I would like to point out that these are some of the parameters, physical parameters and chemical and physiological parameters that are part and parcel of the classification of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. I mean, we know that when there is an increase in dryness or a change in fluidity or size or viscosity, you know that it affects movement. And what is very interesting is how these are all networked. So if you take Vata, Vata has a function associated with it, and then there are a set of parameters which are physico-chemical in nature which contribute to that function. Similarly, Pitta and Kapha. So Vata parameters are shown by V1, V2 in the blue color, and Kapha by the green, and then Pitta by the red. You see that, I mean, this is not a random association that I have shown. These are associations which are mentioned in Ayurveda, and these are associations which when a person practices Ayurveda will know exist. So you see that these are the V1, the Vata parameters are intraconnected and also interconnected with other parameters. I have taken a picture from systems biology book. This shows a protein network, how proteins are connected with each other. And you can see the similarity between the two. The only difference is that the nodes here represent proteins, or it could represent genes or metabolites, and here it represents properties. You can call them system properties, and how the system properties are connected, intra and interconnected with each other. When these are in balance, it denotes health. and disease is considered a system perturbation. And the job of the Ayurvedic doctor is to get the system back to balance. And how they do it is very interesting. And they have brought all factors which play a role in health and disease onto the same platform of BP and K. So everything from clinical symptoms to lifestyle activities to environment to food ingredients, animals, plants, everything is understood in terms of Vata, Pitta and Kapha. And I am going to focus on how plants are understood in terms of Vata, Pitta and Kapha. They are not understood directly but through a set of parameters. And these are some of the Ayurvedic pharmacological parameters. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's called Rasa, Guna, Virya, Vipaka. And my work focuses on the very first and major parameter called Rasa. It is generally translated as taste. And although the Rasa goes beyond taste as a chemical sense, and taste we know is an organoleptic property. And so there are 6 rasas, and let's remember that the tastes are also a reflection of chemistry. So there are 6 tastes: sweet, sour, salt, hot, bitter and astringent, and these are understood in terms of Vata, Pitta and Kapha. For example, if you take sweet, something with a sweet taste will decrease Pitta and Vata and increase Kapha. In other words, something with a sweet taste will decrease certain functions and parameters coming under P and V, and it will increase certain other functions and parameters coming under K. So this is the basic thumb rule for understanding the substances. Although Ayurveda goes beyond this thumb rule, it gives detailed information as to what each of these tastes would do in the system. There are nearly 3,000 medicinally useful plant parts which have been identified and individually categorized according to the rasa. So they have not left any part of the plant: root bark, stem bark, pith, leaf, bud, etc., etc. They have been individually characterized, and I think it's phenomenal work which our ancestors, the ancient Ayurvedic doctors, had done. It's so systematically documented. One cannot miss the point that they must have had a methodology to do it. It's not a random. It's not a question of tasting and telling what the taste is, because if you taste many of these plants which they say is sweet, it doesn't taste sweet. So they must have had some methodology, and these have been analyzed for their effects on VP and K. This is an example. Take Terminalia chebula. The medicinally useful part is the fruit, and it has 5 tastes, and you see that there are fine parts of the fruit which are associated with different taste. So with this very brief introduction of the theory of VPK, which also contributes to the understanding or how plants are used for medicinal purposes in Ayurveda, I would like to switch gear and go on to the spectroscopic phytometabolomics for chemosensory signature. The idea is to see whether, or the aim is to see whether I can objectivize the Ayurvedic pharmacological parameter rasa, and see whether it can be used as a quality control parameter for quality assessment. So each plant part can come under a single taste category or combination of taste. So a plant part can have either a single taste or combination of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 tastes. Now I have started with a single taste category. This is not a comprehensive, complete list of the plants. So this is the list. These are the plants that I have started working with. So I have listed here. So what the aim is to see whether there is something running common through these, because this is how Ayurvedic formulations are used, and this is how Ayurvedic physicians use these formulations. So there is obviously running something common here, and I'm trying to use spectroscopic techniques to fingerprint them. So this is the study plan. I take plants. All the plants that I have used are authenticated. I have obtained all of them from Kottakkal Arya Vaidyashala. So the authentication is done in the Department of Botany, the R&D division there. And I make a simple aqueous solution. The aqueous solutions are made in the way that Ayurveda says, the procedures that Ayurveda has laid out. I'm trying to stay as close to Ayurveda as possible because I'm trying to understand the Ayurvedic parameter. So these are basically 20 to 30% aqueous solutions. and I run them through a number of tests. So I do phytochemical screening. I use a technique called electronic tongue to measure taste, NMR. FTIR, LIBS, it stands for laser induced breakdown spectroscopy. This gives elemental analysis, so if there are any toxic elements in my sample, I can LIBS fix it out. And then other spectroscopic techniques like LC-MS and UV and Raman spectroscopy. And all these, the data from each of these are put through multivariate analysis, and then I'm looking for a fingerprint. So this is the basic study plan, and I would be sharing with you all the data from NMR and eTank. So the NMR metabolomics has two approaches, targeted and untargeted. In untargeted, you get a global profile where you are not looking for the single peaks, but you are looking at the pattern. And the targeted, where you are looking for particular phytomarkers. So I am adopting both these approaches, and the global profiling actually gives information about the phytomarkers. So I work at 700 megahertz spectrometer, and looking for a proton NMR. I also do phosphorus NMR and as well carbon, but I will be showing the data from proton NMR today, and these are the acquisition parameters. So one advantage with NMR is that your sample does not require any preparation, like HPLC and HPTLCs. And so all my samples are crude samples. I am not looking at single molecules, they are crude samples. And so these are 4 representative spectra from each taste category. You can see that there are obvious differences. You see that the one from the sweet category, it has lots of peaks in the sugar region. These are also primary metabolite region. Of course, all plants will have primary metabolites, and what probably will be unique to each plant is the secondary metabolites. So you see that there are, despite the fact that all plants are primary metabolites, you can see that this has a higher level of sugars compared to these. And I would like to point out a couple of interesting phytochemicals here. If you look at bitter plant, valine is considered it's an amino acid which is present in bitter, which is responsible for bitter taste. So valine, threonine, histidine, phenylalanine, they are all considered markers for bitter taste. And you can see them in these bitter taste categories. And I would like to focus on these two groups because I have maximum data from these two groups. You can see that there are, the regions which differentiate these groups. One is definitely the sugar region, and this is the amino acid region. So you see that there's hardly any amino acids in this Vitis vinifera. You cannot pick it up with in the NMR spectra, whereas you see loads of them in Piper longum. And you also see that Piper longum has more secondary metabolites compared to Vitis vinifera. So when I subject this to the PCA analysis, principal component analysis, you see 2 definite clusters for the 2 categories. So the entire spectra from 0 to 12 ppm is broken up into small spectral bins of 0.04 ppm and subjected to the analysis. And so there is definitely a fingerprint, there is definitely a region in the NMR spectrum which seems to indicate that, that they can give some information about the categories, the taste categories. So that's the global profiling, that's the untargeted NMR metabolomics. And coming to the targeted NMR metabolomics, this consists of identifying each peak. And for this, I do what is called a 2-dimensional NMR to identify the peaks, and then I make these assignments. You can see gingerol. This is an aqueous solution. Remember that this is not an isolated active principle. This is a crude solution. You can see gingerol, and whatever is shown in the blue color are secondary metabolites. And you see the huge amount of polyphenols. This is the same spectra but 2 different regions. This is from 0 to 4.6 ppm. This is from 5 to about 9 ppm. And so as I said, I use 2D NMR for doing the targeted analysis of NMR. Now coming to this very interesting equipment called electronic tongue. This is an equipment which is used to measure taste objectively. This is used extensively in pharmaceutical industries to assess the bitterness of drugs, and when a bitter drug is given a sugar coat, how much of the bitterness is seen through the coat. So this e-tongue is used for objective measurement of these. And tea and coffee industries also use this. Now they are trying to move away from the panel of tasters to more objective measurement of taste. And it can measure, it is designed to measure sweet, bitter, hot and salt taste, pungent and salt taste. What I am trying to do is I am trying to train the system to measure the taste mentioned in Ayurveda. Ayurveda talks about 6 tastes, so we are trying to train the system to measure the Ayurvedic taste so that we can see whether the Ayurvedic rasas can be objectively measured by this. Of course, it's always a moot question whether, as I said, the rasa mentioned in Ayurveda is the same as taste as we understand in modern chemistry. So different tastes are associated with different molecules such as ionic and neutral. So this is the basic principle of electronic tongue. And the sensors are based on principle of chemical modified field effect transistor. They are permeable membranes and they are differentially sensitive to different molecules. And when these sensors are put in a sample, there is a potential difference created between the reference electrode and the sensors, and this is measured for a taste evaluation. And so this is the equipment. It's called Alphamos. This is a company in France which manufactures these equipments. You can see that these are the sensors. There are 7 sensors, and when it's put in a sample, all the sensors measure the whatever molecules are available in the sample, and then they are there is a differential sensing that's taken into account to work out the taste. And so these are the sensors, and this is the auto sampler. These beakers are the ones where you put the sample, and then the sensors dip into that, and then you can see the result on the screen here. So we have developed our own database library using standards. So we have a library for sweet taste using calibration. Calibration has been done using sucrose, lactose, glucose, fructose and so on. So we have developed a library for different tastes. And there are 2 aims in these objectives in this work. One is to see whether the rasa mentioned in Ayurveda has a one-to-one correlation with the taste, as we know. And the second is to see whether this can be trained to measure the Ayurvedic classification. And you see that these are there is definitely a correlation, although not a one-to-one correlation, because you see gingiber comes under the pungent taste, and you see that it's coming close to sweet, but then you see that majority of the plants are clustering according to the taste. So this is a very preliminary stage, but I think the preliminary results are very encouraging. And a combination of spectroscopy and other techniques could help in evaluation of taste. And if it actually works out the way I hope it will work out, it will be a very big, it will have a lot of implications and applications for Ayurveda in particular, because there are now so many new plants which are not mentioned in the classical text. So unless the Ayurvedic physician knows what rasa the plant is, he or she will not be in a position to use them according to the Ayurvedic principles. So I mean, there is no point telling an Ayurvedic doctor that this has an anti-inflammatory molecule or an antipyretic or anti-diabetic. They will not be able to use it. You have to tell them what the rasa guna virya vipaka is, and rasa is the very first parameter. And so from an Ayurvedic perspective, rasa can be used as a quality assessment parameter. It's not that it can be used. I feel that it should be used. It will make much more sense for the Ayurvedic community. And I thank the National Medicinal Plan Board, Department of Ayush, for the very generous funding, extremely generous funding. Not only funding, I have continued support from them. and the work has been done by my PhD students, Somnath Ghatak, Gaurav Sharma, and Dr. Prashant Rai is my postdoctoral fellow. He is a natural product chemist, and Dr. Vel Pandian is my collaborator. He is a pharmacologist. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Rama. It's really very trust doing really well. Now, I was wondering every time in the committee I used to ask the Ayurvedic people, give me the answer if we can quantify these properties so that they become the parameters of quality of a plant material on the Ayurvedic basis. But I have not come out, understood any answer so far, but there is a ray of hope with this work that if such kind of work is continued, we work large number of plants which have been categorized in the rasa, and different kind of rasas are estimated, and you can put them in a group and try to find out how we can quantify this so that that becomes a quality parameters of the Ayurvedic plants, and that will be real quality parameter of the Ayurvedic drugs. So I think this kind of work is extremely important. At the same time, the signal from your lecture comes to us that we, as phytochemists, have been focusing more on the secondary plant metabolites. We have been discarding most of the time the primary metabolites. But an Ayurvedic physician, when it comes to use a drug, first he conceives what the patient needs. For example, why churna is there? Because the cellular material is very much desired in that churna. Whether it is Satapalali churna or Trifla churna, there the raw material, cellular material is desired in that drug to be present. That's how the Ayurvedic people prescribe this kind of dosage form. Same way, the primary metabolites are equally important. I was talking to Dr. Vishwakarma that if Bhojvedya we are working, we have been focusing only on triterpene. Well, triterpene good. Most of the triterpenes are becoming to be biologically active. Why do we ignore the polysaccharide which is present in more than what the triterpenes are, not higher concentration? And those polysaccharides which are present as the primary metabolites of the plant material, they are doing something. And most of our rasayana in the Ayurvedic drugs, rasayana group, they are rich in the polysaccharides. Whether it's a Chinespora cordifolia or Withenia somnifera. And here again, Withenia somnifera, as chemists, we are focusing on vithanolide, vithaferine, vithanol. Why not to focus on Ashwagandha nagori, which is the real Ayurvedic ashwagandha, which contains highest concentration of the polysaccharides, and it's a root which is entirely distinct from the other types of ashwagandhas. I think this is a signal, Dr. Rama, from your lecture, that the phytochemists should try to understand that the primary metabolites are equally important. Ayurvedic physician doesn't ignore any part of the plant which is occurring in nature as something to do. Thank you, Dr. Rama. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, this is the end of the session, and I am extremely grateful to the learned speakers who have spoken so well during the session. Dr. Klaus Khan, and then Mr. Jitinder, Meenakshi Negi, and Dr. Malbhani, and then Dr. Rama. All these speakers have delivered wonderfully exciting lectures. I'm sure we'll gain a lot from this. Thank you.